My parents laughed when I told them I couldn't afford rent after my son was born. "You're a man, figure it out," they said, then turned my old bedroom into a home theater. So I took my baby and left. They had no idea where I went or who I'd become. There are moments in life that reshape you entirely, moments that reveal the true nature of people you thought you knew. For me, that moment arrived not with a bang, but with a horrifying whisper. The day I discovered my own parents were trying to buy my son, to snatch him from my life with a suitcase full of lies and cold, hard cash. My name is Jordan, and I'm 28. My world flipped when my son was born, but the real story, the one that broke me down and built me back up, started long before I held little Eli. It began in my parents' kitchen, under the stark hum of their new LED lights, the very day I went to them, not for money, but for understanding. I was drowning. "I'm not sure how I'm going to make rent this month," I confessed, my voice barely a whisper, thick with shame. My father, with a dismissive smirk, cracked open a beer. "You're a man. Figure it out," he grunted, already turning his back. My mother, her voice sickeningly light, added, "You've always been a little dramatic." Like I was complaining about a stubbed toe, not desperately clinging to a slowly sinking life raft. I didn't argue. Just a numb nod, keys in hand, and I walked out. But inside, something cracked. Quietly. Subtly. Like ice breaking under heavy snow. And that quiet fracture? That's what scared me the most. You see, it wasn't always like this. I was their only kid, their miracle baby, after a string of heartbreaks. Our house had a red door, a backyard more weeds than grass, but it was home. They were the parents who cheered loudest at my soccer games, beaming at my high school graduation. But somewhere along the way, that warmth just cooled. Maybe it was when I chose work over college, trying to build a life with my high school girlfriend, Madison. Or maybe it was when she left, and I stayed, picking up the pieces while my friends scattered and my parents just stopped asking how I was. Still, I clung to them. Sundays for dinner, fixing their roof after a storm, driving mom to her appointments when dad couldn't be bothered. I guess I hoped they'd remember the boy they once loved. That the people who once held me when I cried wouldn't one day laugh when I needed help. When Ava got pregnant, I didn't tell them. Part of me was terrified, unsure if I was ready for fatherhood. A bigger part knew they wouldn't care. Ava and I had a messy breakup. She didn't want me in the delivery room, even though I'd promised to be there for our baby. That gutted me more than I expected. I spent 3 agonizing days pacing the hospital parking lot, watching other couples walk out beaming, cradling their newborns like trophies. "You're going to do this no matter what," I whispered to myself, a desperate prayer. Then, finally, I held Eli. Tiny, wrinkly, screaming his lungs out. But in that moment, the world fell silent. I wasn't alone. I wasn't a failure. I was a dad. A week later, Eli was home. Ava needed to focus on school, so I took on full-time care. Nights at a gas station, barely scraping by. Diapers, formula, wipes, it all added up. I was a ghost in the mirror, hollow-eyed, running on fumes. But every time Eli's tiny fingers wrapped around mine, it was worth it. Still, reality hit hard. I missed rent. Then again, my landlord issued a warning. I sold everything, my old guitar, my PS5, even my grandpa's watch. And when that still wasn't enough, I swallowed my pride and asked for help again. That's how I ended up in their kitchen, humiliated, desperate. A second chance, I hoped. What I found instead was a sleek, dark gray home theater where my childhood bedroom used to be. "We figured it was time to make this space useful," Mom chirped, leading me upstairs weeks later, not a trace of guilt in her voice. Blackout curtains, a giant screen, reclining leather seats, surround sound. My childhood, replaced by entertainment. I couldn't step past the doorway. I'd always imagined bringing Eli here, showing him my old room, building pillow forts, telling him stories. That fantasy dissolved into nothing. "You should see it when the lights dim," Dad called from the living room. "Feels just like the movies." I left without a word. That night, holding Eli a little tighter, watching him sleep, it hit me. They didn't just turn my room into a theater. They erased me. They buried my memory under popcorn machines. And for the first time, I stopped hoping they'd come around. I started planning. They had no idea who I was becoming. The weeks that followed were a cold silence. No calls, no visits. My Sundays became sacred, just Eli and me. Parks or building towers from empty formula cans on the floor. It wasn't much, but it was ours. The silence from my parents screamed volumes. No one checked in. No one asked about Eli. It was like we'd both vanished. Then a text from Mom. Dinner Sunday. Just one line. Like nothing had ever happened. I almost ignored it. I should have. But a desperate curiosity gnawed at me. Maybe, just maybe, they felt some remorse? So I went. The table was set. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, Mom's too salty broccoli casserole. It looked like the old days. Eli was asleep in his carrier on my chest. I walked in quietly, and there they were, already seated with my cousin Jason. Jason, the golden child. 3 years younger, flunked out of college twice, crashed 2 cars, but always knew how to charm Mom. Look who decided to show up, Dad grunted, not even standing. Mom was unnervingly cheerful. Oh, you brought the baby, she said. The baby. She didn't even remember his name. Didn't ask to hold him, didn't glance down. She just turned back to Jason, gushing about his new solar panel sales job. He preened, humble bragging. They talked for nearly an hour before Dad finally turned to me. So, still working nights at that gas station? I nodded. Yeah, it's steady for now. Jason jumped in, man, that sounds brutal. What do you do with the kid during your shift? I kept my voice calm. I take him with me sometimes. And when I can't, a neighbor helps. Mom made a face. A gas station isn't exactly safe for a baby, Jordan. Well, I said, unable to hide the steel in my voice. I asked for help. Didn't exactly get much. Dad glared. We raised you to be independent, not to come crying every time things got hard. Jason actually looked uncomfortable. Maybe I should know. Mom cut him off sharply. You're fine, sweetie. Jordan just gets like this sometimes. Like this. I didn't even know what that meant anymore. Then came the kicker. Jason might be moving in with us for a while, Mom announced, beaming. Until he gets on his feet. I blinked. Into the guest room? She smiled. No, into your old room. The theater's just a few things, really. Jason could help us move it to the basement. I stared at her. So, you're going to dismantle the theater to make room for him? It's not undoing anything, she brushed it off. He just needs a little stability. He's family. I couldn't speak. When I needed stability, I was a grown man who needed to figure it out. When he needed a room, the theater got dismantled. Besides, Dad added, Jason's got potential. He just needs the right environment to thrive. I swallowed a bitter laugh. Of course. Jason stood up, mumbling, sorry, man, before leaving. Once he was gone, Mom sighed dramatically. You didn't have to make it so awkward. My voice was low, steady, barely my own. Let me get this straight. You won't help me and your grandson when I'm drowning, but you're bending over backward to house Jason because he has potential. Don't turn this into something it's not, Dad snapped. You made it clear where I stand, I said. You've been making it clear for years. They didn't respond. Just looked at me like I was the problem. Like I was being ungrateful. Like I was some bitter outsider. I walked out without finishing dinner. After that night, I stopped replying to their texts. Stopped updating them on Eli. I even blocked their numbers for a while, just for space. But I still heard things from my aunt, from old neighbors. Jason moved in. They helped him buy a used car. Mom was bragging at church about how proud she was of her boys, plural. Apparently, I no longer counted. But the worst came 2 months later, when I bumped into Mom at the grocery store. Eli was in the cart, giggling, grabbing cereal boxes. She looked surprised to see me, even more surprised to see how well Eli was doing. He's getting big, she said, touching his cheek like she had a right to. I didn't say anything. She looked me up and down. You look different. Are you eating okay? I still didn't answer. Then she leaned in, her voice low, and said something that will forever echo in my memory. You know, if you had just been more grateful, we could have helped you. But you always act like a victim. That was it. That was the moment. The realization that they would never truly see me. Not as a son. Not as a father. Not as a man doing everything he could to raise his child right. I walked away without a word, but inside, something shifted again. Not a crack this time. Something solid. Cold. Final. They had no idea who I was becoming, but they were about to find out. It was a Tuesday night when the betrayal truly cut through whatever fragile pieces of family I still believed we had. Eli was teething something fierce, screaming louder than I thought possible. I was pacing, half asleep, teething ring in one hand, bottle warming in the other. 2 days unshowered, my uniform stained with formula. Nothing mattered but his pain. My phone buzzed. I ignored it. Buzzed again. And again. 3 missed calls, 1 voicemail. It was my Aunt Cheryl. That alone made me pause. Cheryl was quiet, observant, missed nothing. 3 calls from her meant something was wrong. I settled Eli in his crib, turned on his mobile, praying for 5 minutes of peace. Then I played the voicemail. Jordan, it's Cheryl. I know we don't talk much, but I thought you should know before you hear it from someone else. Your parents posted something on Facebook about Eli. You should check. I'm sorry. My chest went tight. I hadn't opened Facebook in months, but my hands shook as I logged in. Notifications exploded. Messages, tags, comments, mostly from strangers. It was a photo, posted by my mom, Eli's sweet face, asleep in his car seat. The caption, "Meet our newest little angel Eli. Our sweet grandson who we're so proud to help raise. Being grandparents is the greatest joy in the world." I stared at it, frozen. They were basking in praise, likes pouring in. Friends from church, coworkers, even old high school friends. All gushing about their new chapter. Except they weren't raising him. They weren't even part of his life. They hadn't changed a single diaper, hadn't held him through a fever, hadn't bought a single box of wipes. I zoomed in on the photo. It was taken at the park. The day I'd taken Eli to the duck pond, thinking we'd finally enjoy some fresh air. I remembered now. I'd seen my mom across the park with a friend, turned away, not in the mood for small talk. She'd snuck a photo. Without asking. Posted it without permission. Parading my son around like a trophy, a symbol of her maternal success. It felt like someone had reached into my chest and twisted my ribs. Then I saw a comment that made my blood run cold. From Jason, "Can't wait to help babysit again this weekend. He's such a chill kid." Again? What was he talking about? They'd never watched Eli. Then the pieces snapped together, fast and sharp like breaking glass. I'd started a new shift last week, left Eli with my neighbor Carrie. She'd agreed to watch him 2 nights a week. She was older, kind, quiet. I trusted her. But she told me her sister was visiting and offered to leave Eli with someone else she trusted for just 1 night. She'd stay there, too, Carrie said. It would be safe. She hadn't said who. My mouth went dry. I called her. "Carrie, hey, sorry it's late. Quick question. That night last week, when your sister was in town, where was Eli staying?" "Oh, with my friend Lynn's place. She and her daughter helped watch him." "Why? Everything okay?" I tried to breathe. "Did anyone else stop by? Like my parents or a guy named Jason?" "Oh, well, yeah. Your mom stopped in actually. She said she missed Eli. Lynn said she seemed sweet, so she let her hold him. I didn't think it'd be a problem." "What?" I barely remember ending the call. My hands were shaking. My knees felt weak. They hadn't just used his photo. They'd found a way to hold him. Without my knowledge. Without my consent. They had crossed a line that wasn't just about boundaries. They broke trust. They stole moments. My moments. I sat on the floor, staring at the wall. Eli snored softly in the next room, oblivious. Innocent. And I hated that they'd touched him. Not because they were dangerous, but because they weren't entitled. They had no right. And yet, somehow, they believed they did. That was the emotional switch. The moment the hurt calcified into something colder, cleaner. No more bargaining. No more hoping they'd change. That night, I realized they didn't want to change. They just wanted to own the version of me and Eli that fit their story. The next day, I deleted every trace of my Facebook. Pulled every photo of Eli offline. blocked everyone who liked that post. And I made a promise. They wouldn't get to use him as a prop again. Not ever. But they weren't done yet. Not by a long shot. And the next thing they did? It nearly cost me everything. The days after the Facebook betrayal blurred into a numb routine. Work, home, feed Eli, bathe him, put him to bed. Then I'd sit on the edge of my mattress. We didn't even have a couch, and stare at the wall. Drained. Like someone had scooped out everything that made me feel human. I told no one. What was I supposed to say? That my parents posed as loving grandparents online while ignoring us in real life? That they engineered access to my son behind my back just for a photo op? That they allowed my cousin Jason, whose name he probably couldn't spell, to babysit? It sounded paranoid even to me. That was the worst part. They hadn't broken the law. They hadn't screamed or hit me. What they'd done was subtle, quiet, a million tiny cuts hidden behind smiles and just trying to help. And when you try to explain that kind of hurt, you just sound ungrateful. Bitter. Crazy. One night, 2 weeks after the photo incident, Eli wouldn't stop crying. A rash on his neck, warm skin. Teething? Or worse. I had no money for a doctor. Not until payday. The landlord had called twice, his voice growing shorter. I sat in the bathroom, Eli wailing against my chest, whispering, "It's okay. It's okay." But I was talking to myself, trying to convince myself this wasn't what failure looked like. When he finally fell asleep in my arms, I stayed there for hours. My back screamed, the floor was cold. I saw myself in the mirror, hollow eyes, pale skin, stubble-covered stranger. A man twice his age. That was my rock bottom. Not an explosive fight. Just a quiet, sleepless night in a cracked tile bathroom with no heat, holding my sick baby, wondering if I'd make it through the month. And the worst part? I almost called them. I stared at my mom's contact for 20 minutes. It's just for Eli, I told myself. Not for me. Maybe if I framed it right, kept my voice calm, used the right words, they'd offer something. A ride to the clinic, a bag of groceries, anything. But then I remembered her face in the grocery store. You always act like a victim. I closed the phone and turned it off. That night, I didn't sleep at all. Not because of Eli. Because something inside me had finally shifted for good. I stopped hoping they'd change. I stopped waiting for them to love me the way I needed. And I started planning. Not revenge, not at first. Just distance. I made a crude list, scratched onto the back of a junk mail envelope, a better job. Childcare I could trust. A new place, more than one room. And maybe, just maybe, school. Something remote, flexible. I'd always been good with computers. It felt impossible, but I didn't tear up the list. I folded it and tucked it under Eli's crib. The next morning, I called a local community center. Free parenting workshops, resources. I didn't tell anyone. I just showed up, Eli on my hip, circles under my eyes, anxiety simmering in my chest. The receptionist smiled. "You here for the 10 a.m. single dads group?" I hesitated. Then I nodded. She handed me a pamphlet. "You're not the only one. Not even close." That was the first time I cried in public. Not loud, just a few tears. I sat in a circle with 5 other guys, all with babies and strollers. We talked sleep schedules, feeding routines, budgeting on minimum wage, and surviving being told you weren't enough. Slowly, something inside me woke up. I wasn't alone. I wasn't broken. I was rebuilding. And this time, I wasn't building anything for them. I was building something for us. Me and Eli. But of course, when people sense you pulling away, they panic. And that's when my parents did something I never saw coming. They filed for grandparents' visitation rights. Claimed I was unstable. Claimed I was keeping Eli from them out of spite. Claimed they were just trying to stay in his life. Suddenly, my rock bottom had a basement. Because now they were coming for him. The court papers landed on my doormat. A plain white envelope. No return address, no warning. I opened it with one hand, holding Eli in the other, still groggy from his 3 a.m. bottle. Confusion first. Legalize always looks like a foreign language. Then my eyes landed on the words, petition for grandparent visitation. It didn't hit me like a punch. It hit me like ice. Numbing disbelief. I sat on the floor, reading and rereading. According to them, I was emotionally unstable, financially incapable, willfully alienating Eli. They even had statements from Jason, claiming I'd become paranoid and aggressive, that I'd shouted at my mother in public. All I could think was, they're trying to take him from me. Even if just for weekends, even just for a few hours. They wanted a piece of him, control, something to post about, brag about, parade around like a trophy they never earned. But the fear didn't last, because I'd already begun the climb. It had started slowly in that parenting group. Someone mentioned a nonprofit that helped single parents access online education grants. I signed up the same day. Within 2 weeks, I was enrolled in a fully remote IT certification program. Free, flexible, fast-tracked. I studied while Eli napped. I studied while he cried. One hand on the keyboard, the other patting his back. The gas station job was killing me, so I picked up part-time gig work instead. Data entry, virtual assistant stuff. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid more than I expected. Best of all, I didn't have to leave Eli with anyone. I took every small win like it was gold. First $200 freelance job? Bought a used laptop. Passed my first IT exam? Taped the certificate to the fridge. Landed my first real client, an e-commerce business needing tech support? I danced in the kitchen with Eli until he puked on my shirt. But I didn't stop. I built a routine. I built momentum. I built a life. Eli started smiling more, sleeping better. I started sleeping, sometimes even 5 hours a night. We moved out of that shoebox apartment and into a small duplex on the other side of town, where rent was lower. It wasn't fancy, but it was clean, safe. I didn't post about it. Didn't tell anyone. I ghosted the toxic side of the family completely. I kept everything small, quiet, careful. Then, one day, an email from the nonprofit's career support team. A partner company was hiring junior tech associates. Remote, full benefits, decent salary. Willing to overlook experience if I passed their assessment. I took it while Eli watched Bluey on the floor behind me. He fell asleep halfway through. I finished with one foot gently rocking his bouncer. I passed. The job paid 3 times what I'd made at the gas station. I nearly dropped the phone. My first paycheck came 2 weeks later. I paid all my bills early. Then I opened a savings account. For the first time in years, I wasn't choosing between formula or rent. I was choosing which brand of diapers I liked more. And that's when I started to fight back. I didn't hire a fancy lawyer. I couldn't afford one. But I found a family law clinic through the same nonprofit. They connected me with a pro bono attorney named Miriam. Stern voice, kind eyes. She didn't flinch when I handed her the court petition. They don't have a case, she said, reviewing the documents. But that won't stop them from trying. She helped me gather everything. Texts, emails, that Facebook post, a written statement from Cheryl. Carrie wrote one too, confirming how my parents had manipulated their way into holding Eli. We built a file, brick by brick. At the same time, I rebuilt myself. Cut sugar. Started walking with Eli every morning. Journaled just to keep my head clear. I was no longer drowning. I was moving forward. I still didn't sleep much, but when I did, I didn't have nightmares anymore. I started taking more photos of Eli, not for show, but just for us. Memories we could keep. Smiles, first steps, him trying to feed himself mashed banana and getting it in his hair. He was growing fast. So was I. One night, I found the old envelope. The list I'd written in the dark, hunched over in that freezing bathroom. A better job. Childcare I could trust. A new place. School. Freedom. Every item was checked off except one. Because freedom, I realized, didn't mean hiding anymore. It meant facing them in court. Letting them see what I'd become. Letting them realize, publicly, officially, legally, that they had no power over me or my son. And as the court date approached, I wasn't scared. I was ready. But I had no idea what they'd pull next. Just before our first hearing, they made one final move. And this time, it wasn't just about me. They tried to bribe Ava. I hadn't spoken to Ava in months. We were civil, figuring out co-parenting on our own terms. I kept her updated with photos. She checked in regularly, but never pushed. We had a rhythm. So when she called me out of the blue on a Saturday morning, I knew something was off. Her voice was tight. Hey, are you alone? Eli was in his high chair, smearing applesauce. Yeah, what's going on? She took a breath. I think your parents are trying to get custody. Full custody. The room tilted. What? They showed up at my campus yesterday, she said, unannounced. Said they wanted to talk. I thought maybe something happened to you, so I agreed to meet. We sat down in a cafe, and they told me. They told me you were spiraling, that Eli wasn't safe. I couldn't speak. They said you were unstable, paranoid, refusing to let anyone help, that you'd cut everyone off, and that they were stepping in to make sure Eli had a chance at a stable family. My heart pounded. What did you say? Ava's voice sharpened. I asked if they were joking. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. They tried to manipulate me, Jordan. They said I was young, that I'd wasted enough time on you, and that if I agreed to sign over primary custody to them, just temporarily, they'd help pay for my tuition. Offered me 10 grand up front. I sat down slowly. They offered you money? Yep. In a manila envelope. Cash. They said it was just to help me get through the semester while they stepped in as real guardians. I felt something rise in my throat. Rage, disbelief, nausea. I swallowed it down. They were calm, cold, like they'd done this before. Ava paused. And the worst part? They had documents. Legal-looking ones. They were going to try and get you declared an unfit parent. Using what? Facebook posts and hearsay. They didn't say, but they acted like it was already in motion. Like I'd be a fool not to cooperate. I was quiet for a long time. Then I asked the only question that mattered. Did you take the envelope? Of course not. I told them to leave, but I took a photo of it. I took photos of everything, and I recorded the conversation on my phone. They didn't know. I stared at the ceiling. Slowly, a strange clarity settled over me. Not panic, not even fury. Just focus. Because now I had something they couldn't bury. Proof. Real, tangible evidence of manipulation, coercion, and an attempted custody interference. Something any judge, any lawyer, would take seriously. I met Miriam the next day. When I played the audio, her eyebrows lifted in quiet satisfaction. Well, she said, sitting back in her chair, this changes things. We updated our case file. Ava signed an affidavit, submitted her recording. Miriam added new language to our response brief, citing attempted bribery and malicious intent to undermine parental rights. They tried to play a long game, she told me, but they got greedy. That was their mistake. A few days later, the judge granted a temporary injunction, barring my parents from contacting either me or Ava without going through legal counsel. It wasn't a final victory, but it was enough to hold them off. And that's when things really shifted. Around the same time, something unexpected happened at work. I'd been quietly plugging away at my new IT job, fixing bugs, handling support tickets. Behind-the-scenes work. But then I caught a system vulnerability. A big one. Something that could have caused a serious data leak. I flagged it, patched it, sent a detailed report to my manager. 2 days later, I was in a Zoom meeting with the CTO. A week after that, an offer for a promotion, full-time, benefits, nearly double my current salary. They even sent me a company laptop and offered to cover childcare for the first 6 months if I needed it. I didn't know what to say. For the first time, people were rewarding me for doing the right thing. And I wasn't going to waste it. I used the extra money to hire a private investigator. Miriam had mentioned it wouldn't hurt to dig into Jason's claims. If we could discredit his testimony, or better yet, prove he'd lied under oath, we'd have a much stronger position. What the investigator found. It wasn't just helpful, it was gold. Jason had a record. Not criminal, but a messy string of evictions, unpaid debts, and a restraining order filed by an ex-girlfriend just 2 years ago. The report detailed his history of unstable behavior, including angry outbursts and allegations of harassment. And better still, he was still living in my old room. On paper, not a tenant. But there he was, living rent-free in the very room my parents had refused to give me back, while telling a judge I was unstable. We gathered every piece: screen captures, reports, timestamps, photos. We built a file so thick it barely fit in Miriam's binder. The final step: public pressure. I didn't want to go nuclear, but I needed leverage. So, I created a burner Facebook account and posted a simple, neutral message in the local parenting group. What would you do if your child's grandparents tried to file for custody behind your back while offering cash bribes to the baby's mother and living with someone who has a history of harassment? I didn't name names, but people talked. The post got over 200 comments in 2 days. And wouldn't you know it, word got back to them. I know because my mom called Miriam's office and begged for a meeting. We didn't mean for it to go this far, she said. We just wanted to be involved in Eli's life. Miriam's reply was calm and final: then you shouldn't have tried to buy him. The court hearing was 2 weeks away. I was ready. They weren't. And they didn't know it yet. But I was about to walk into that courtroom with something they'd never expect: power. The courthouse was colder than I expected. Not physically, but in the way the walls seemed to hum with tension, absorbing every strained whisper. I wore a button-down shirt I'd ironed 3 times, even though Eli had wrinkled it again within seconds of me picking him up. He sat in his stroller beside me, gnawing on a rubber giraffe, blissfully unaware that the people trying to remove him from my life were sitting just down the hall, less than 50 feet away. Miriam arrived exactly on time, briefcase in one hand, stacks of meticulously labeled folders in the other. She gave me a reassuring nod. They don't know what's about to hit them, she whispered. When the clerk called our case, I stood. My parents were already seated with their attorney, a sharp-looking woman in a red blazer who oozed confidence, clearly expecting a quick, clean win. My father avoided eye contact. My mother gave me a tight, polite smile, the kind you give a stranger in an elevator. Jason wasn't there. We'd find out why later. The judge, a tall, silver-haired man named Whitmore, looked through our paperwork for a good 10 minutes before speaking. He had that way of drawing silence out just long enough to make everyone uncomfortable. Let's begin, he said. The first 30 minutes were standard. They made their case. I had become increasingly isolated, hostile to family, potentially emotionally unfit. My parents nodded solemnly, like they were delivering bad news about a distant relative instead of shredding their own son's credibility. Then it was our turn. Miriam didn't raise her voice once. She simply opened the binder and began. She started with character. Letters from my pediatrician praising my attentiveness. From my neighbor Carrie affirming my consistency and dedication. From Ava herself. Then she showed financial stability, my pay stubs, the promotion letter, the childcare assistance. Then came the Facebook post, the photo of Eli, the fake narrative, the manipulation. The judge raised his eyebrows but didn't interrupt. And then, the recording. We played the audio of my mother calmly offering Ava money to sign away temporary custody. The courtroom went still. The words hung in the air like smoke. $10,000 up front. I think we can all agree he's not ready. This is what's best for the baby. I didn't look at them while it played. I didn't need to. When it ended, Miriam let the silence speak for itself. Then, as the cherry on top, she submitted Jason's file. The restraining order. The unpaid debts. The history of erratic behavior. Your Honor, she said, the plaintiffs have misrepresented their intentions and their character at every turn. They have attempted to undermine my client with false accusations, and they have sought to exploit the mother of this child with financial coercion. We are not here because they are concerned for Eli's welfare. We are here because they want control. And that is not a legal right. It is an entitlement, one that ends today. For the first time, I looked over. My mother's hands were shaking. My father was glaring down at the table, jaw tight. Their lawyer, she was silent. When the judge finally spoke, he was calm, firm. This court does not take lightly the decision to grant or deny grandparent visitation. It is a tool meant to preserve relationships, not punish parents or assert dominance. He looked directly at my parents. Based on the evidence presented, including the recorded attempt to circumvent parental rights, I find this petition not only inappropriate, but harmful in intent. He turned to me. Mr. Reed, full custody remains with you. You are, in this court's view, a responsible and capable parent. I didn't breathe until the gavel came down. And then I exhaled. It was over. But I wasn't done. Not yet. Because I'd learned something in that courtroom, something that had been growing inside me ever since I sat on that cold bathroom floor all those months ago. Power isn't about anger. It's about control. Control of the narrative, of your choices, of who gets to matter in your life. So I stood up, walked over to them calmly, and said something I'd rehearsed 100 times, but never actually thought I'd get to say. You've taught me a lot, but not in the way you think. You taught me what kind of parent not to be. What kind of person I'll never become. My mother opened her mouth. I raised my hand. I don't need your apology. And Eli doesn't need your presence. From this point on, you are strangers to us. And strangers don't get updates. They don't get visits. They don't get photos. I leaned in slightly. You had your chance to be family. You used it to lie. Then I turned and walked away. They didn't follow. They didn't call. And when we stepped out of that courthouse, Eli still in his stroller, giggling at the pigeons in the courtyard, I realized this wasn't just revenge. This was freedom. And it had never looked better. In the weeks after the hearing, the silence from my parents was deafening. Not a call, not a text. No birthday card for Eli when he turned 1. No happy holidays. Nothing. And that, in a way, was louder than anything they could have said. Their world was unraveling, and they were trying to pretend it wasn't. Jason, who had so confidently submitted his statement, vanished. Word got around that he left town quietly, maybe to avoid legal trouble of his own. I heard from Cheryl that my parents were deeply embarrassed, telling everyone they'd withdrawn the case for the sake of peace. But no one was buying it. Especially not after the local parenting group post made its rounds. Their reputations, especially in their tightly knit church circle, took a hit. Not because I went around dragging their names through the mud. I didn't need to. The truth just floated there, unignorable. The kind, doting grandparents had become a cautionary tale, whispered over coffee and casseroles. It got worse for them, though, because after the case, Ava formally modified our custody agreement. She named me as Eli's sole legal guardian until further notice, with full decision-making authority. It was her way of protecting us both, not just from legal threats, but from manipulation. It meant that even if my parents tried something again, they'd have to go through me, not her. Then I made one final move. I contacted my old landlord, the one who had ignored repairs, jacked up rent, and nearly evicted me. I let him know, politely, that I was now in a financial position to take him to court for multiple lease violations from when Eli and I lived there. Unsafe conditions, lack of heating, pest problems, things I had let slide when I was too tired to fight. It wasn't about the money. It was about the message. I'm not that same man anymore. I didn't recognize the version of myself from 6 months ago. That man was drowning, desperate, hanging on by a thread. But now? Now I was steady, focused, capable. Not because I'd found some miracle, but because I'd built something, slowly, painfully, from the ruins. Eli started talking more, first with mumbled gibberish, then with real words. One morning, I was brushing my teeth, and he toddled into the bathroom, arms raised, and said something that stopped me cold, "Dada-happy." I looked at him in the mirror, toothpaste halfway down my chin, and realized I really was. One day, maybe I'll tell him the whole story. Maybe not. Maybe I'll just raise him to know his worth, to know love doesn't come with strings. And that silence, when it's chosen, can be the loudest form of strength. As for my parents, they still live in that house with the red door and the home theater they once bragged about. Only now, there's no audience left. And the projector burned out.